Since our class time might be limited this week, I thought I would record a brief overview of our upcoming paper. First of all, please note that the due date is Wednesday, January 21st, no later than 10 p.m. The first thing that you want to do, of course, is to analyze the topic. So the topic is to analyze the extent to which the lives of two of the following groups changed in the period 1865 to 1900. So as we've discussed in class, there's a lot of change in the Gilded Age. So whenever you see this phrase, the extent, that means how much. So we're analyzing, meaning that we're being persuasive, we're breaking it apart, and we're saying how much did the lives of two of these groups, you can pick whichever group you want, how much did they change in the Gilded Age? And, very important, account for the specific causes of those changes. So remember, to receive a high score on this paper, you need to present a persuasive analysis that gives very specific evidence to prove your point. Convince the reader. Papers that are just descriptive are never going to receive a high score. And the reason that I make that point, that's the level of writing that you're expected to do at this level of high school. That's the level of writing you will be expected to be able to do your freshman year of college. So again, I know it's not everybody's favorite thing. I know papers are grueling. I hear the moans. But trust me, this is going to pay off in the future. That's why you're here. So let's talk about the different groups you can choose from. Think about African Americans, for example. So African Americans, 1865, slavery is over. There's all this promise of emancipation and what freedom will bring. Then during radical Reconstruction, ex-Confederates can't vote. Former slaves can vote. Wow, that's a fundamental change. So now we have voting for African Americans, we have equal rights are protected by the 14th Amendment. Things seem really bright for African Americans. But then Reconstruction fades. Ex-Confederates take back over. And what happens? Well, after 1877, we see the rise of Jim Crow laws in the segregated South, culminating in the 1896 court decision of Plessy v. Ferguson. Now, we haven't covered that yet in class, but we're going to be covering it in our next unit. But definitely read ahead. I mean, you are going to need to read ahead and look at other things. You're not required to do outside research, but I would recommend reading ahead when you pick the topics that you choose so that you do a good job. So again, let's recap just African Americans. 1865, slavery is over. Huge fundamental change. There's all this promise of freedom. There's some actually new rights that are gained, but then segregation sets in by the 1870s. By 1900, are the lives of African Americans any better? Maybe in the South they might be worse. For African Americans out west, there's a land of opportunity. We did discuss that this week with exodusters. So that's the type of information that you want to include. Begin, when you pick two groups, begin in 1865, describe what life was like, and then build the case for how life has changed by 1900. You may remember the analogy I used in class of the DeLorean. Let's hop in our DeLorean. What was life like? How has it fundamentally changed? So that's African Americans. Another group you can do that with is Native Americans, which we did this past week. And as I said, go back to the plains. What was Native American life like at 1865 at the end of the Civil War? And how had all of that evaporated by 1900? So again, build the case, explain, give specific historical evidence. You can do the same with immigrants, but the key, if you're going to choose immigrants, yes, you want to look at how their lives changed and working conditions. Lives got worse, but there were more opportunities for jobs. But definitely you want to deal with like urban growth here, for example. But one thing you want to make very specific in the immigrant section, if you choose immigrants, is where these new immigrants are coming from. In 1865, any immigrants were usually Germany, Ireland, and Chinese immigrants on the West Coast. By the 1880s, we have this tremendous surge of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. Italians, Polish, they're more illiterate, they're more poor, they're less willing to assimilate. They'll send their kids to school to learn English, but they're not willing to send their kid or to learn English themselves. So you want to deal with those complexities of how really immigration fundamentally changes in this period, as well as the lives of immigrants themselves. Industrial workers. There are industries and there are factories in 1865, but nothing compared to the 1880s and 1890s. The rise of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt leads to a mass industrialized economy. So in one respect, more people are working in industrial jobs, but in another respect, working conditions really get worse. You could also deal with labor unions if you choose this topic. Farmers is another one, and I think for farmers, look at all the promise, the things we discussed this week. In 1862 is the Homestead Act, as well as the Pacific Railway Act. So there's all these incentives to move people out to the West, and in the South, in a post-Reconstruction world, farming's not so great, but then there's a hope that it will eventually improve. But let's look at the West, for example, because we just discussed that recently. So hundreds of thousands of people move out west, hoping for that great land of opportunity, but they struggle at first. But then comes new technology and agricultural experiment stations and ways to improve farming and farmers' almanacs. But by the 1880s, farmers are doing such a great job, they're producing too much. And overproduction causes deflation of prices, plus there's already a currency deflation going on. Deflation dooms the debtor. Many farmers go bust. With the Panic of 1893, or really the Depression of 1893, many farmers just pack up and leave. We talked about this week, so look at that. Start the promise of 1865, how farmers' lives improved and then got worse. By 1900, we are no longer a nation that is a majority of farmers. We're a nation of mostly industrial workers and producers, and not agrarian workers anymore. That's a big change. You could also deal with business people. So in 1865, there's no multi-millionaires, certainly no billionaires. There's no massively large corporations. But then that changes. This era is shaped by the personalities of Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie. The railroads, of course, become the first big corporations and publicly trade on Wall Street. So business growth in America really exceeds in the Gilded Age. By 1890, there's efforts to regulate business, but they're not really being enforced. For example, the Sherman Antitrust Act. So there you go. Those are 6 categories you can choose from. All you need to do is pick 2 of them. So start off with an introduction and a thesis. Your thesis, by the way, you could mention, the major changes for the 2, but maybe even set a broader perspective. What is the biggest change in the Gilded Age? How does life in America fundamentally change? And then build your case, discuss the 2 groups, start with 1865, build it through 1900. You could do that for group 1, then group 2, or you could weave 2 groups together if you wanted. That would be fine. And then, of course, a good conclusion. Okay, so formatting is as usual. MLA formatting is expected. Please remember, again, to upload a file to turn it in, not just a copy and paste. If you use sources, make sure that you cite them properly. The textbook should be cited. So remember how to do that. The textbook is cited as, let me see, a pen up here. If you have, this is your end, let's say this is the end of the sentence, you could put a parentheses, and we'll say it's from the textbook, Danzer, section 13.1, like that. Okay, notice there's no punctuation here. The punctuation is here. You should know that by now, but again, I found in college that some professors were really sticklers for formatting, so it's good to get in a practice of knowing your formatting procedures well. The grading rubric is the same as what we've done in the past. So introduction and thesis, evidence, accuracy, significance, time and change, because you want to demonstrate change well here, a conclusion, and then of course the last 2 areas deal with the actual mechanics and the formatting of the paper itself. So I hope this was a helpful tutorial. It's about 9-10 minutes long. We probably wouldn't have had 9 or 10 minutes in class, so this is something you can look at on your own time or when you have the chance, or to look back at. So again, email me, message me, post on the wall in Schoology if you have questions while I'm gone, and I'm really looking forward to reading your papers. I can honestly tell you, after reading paper number 4, your writing is getting so much better. I'm very proud of the progress that all of you have made, and I truly hope that it pays off in the future and that you notice the dividends when you reach college. Take care and have a good day.